Good afternoon, everybody. My name is David Dwyer. I'm Managing Director of Data Compliance Limited. We're an Irish company. And I've been invited here from ICTTF to discuss the value of personal data, or PII, personally identifiable information, as it's also known as. So I'll just move in here a little bit. Thank you. So I think it's important just to start by giving you maybe a little bit of background to myself and how I fit in here, I suppose, today, and why I've been invited to discuss this particular angle. In short, I'm an information security consultant. I have a wide range of experience. I work with many different organisations throughout Ireland, from small businesses right the way through to very large organisations. And when I say I'm an information security consultant, it covers a multitude of different areas, which from any one day I could be wearing many different hats. On one day it could be dealing with data protection law, and we've heard some good stuff around data protection this morning from Billy Hawkes, our data commissioner. There's a lot of changes in that area, as we discussed earlier, coming down the line. So that's of particular interest. Other areas would be auditing. I work with various standards in security, ISO 27001 particularly, but others such as credit card standards, PCI, DSS, etc. And then there's business continuity and other standards there. But essentially, if I was to sum it up, I look at risk in businesses and in organisations, and I look to identify that and manage it as best we can. But there's also awareness training as well as what is involved in our day-to-day work. So there's many organisations that we work with. Most of them would be familiar to you, either in your personal lives or through business from day-to-day perspectives. It's not a sales pitch here today. I need to be very careful of that. But it's just to give you a little bit of background as to who I am, what I do, and why I've been invited here today. In particular, I think the whole agenda for today is about collaborating. It's about sharing our experiences and working together to see how well we can work together on it. So that's what I'm certainly getting out of it, and that's what I'm hearing from the people I speak with today and at the other seminars we've conducted. So without further ado, my presentation is very straightforward. The good news is it's very short, and there's a break coming up, a comfort break coming up literally in the next 10 or 12 minutes. So hang in there. When I was asked to present today, I looked at a whole different kind of angle on this. Personal data, PII, what's it worth? And I suppose there's a number of different ways of looking at it, what it's worth. I mean, if I asked each individual here on a one-to-one basis, what's your personal data worth? I'd probably come back with maybe 200 or 300 different answers. So there's, I suppose, the perspective of looking at it from an individual point of view, but other areas that I think we should be looking at is from the business perspective, from the organisation's perspective. We're all managers here in one way or another. We have roles where they're very complex. We've businesses and operations that we need to look after. And all of this area is of interest to us, be it data protection, technology, people management. The whole thing comes in together from a business perspective. But there's also another area that we should look at, and that's the value of personal data to others. So I'll talk a little bit about the risks and that towards the end. So to give an overview, we're all familiar with personal data. We know what it is. It's from your name and address, but right the way through to our emails. A lot of the presenters discussed apps, mobile phones, smartphones, etc. There's been a lot of talk on that. And, the way the world is going now, we're just embracing all of that technology, taking it for granted. And, from any one day to the next, we're being asked for personal data, be it from the time you walk into this hotel to sign a registration form, or the time you're asked to take out your credit card and book a flight or whatever. So it covers a multitude of areas. Let's look at that area. From the business perspective, I suppose you're looking at employee data, but you're also looking at customer data, and it covers a number of different aspects there. We've got automated data, which is in the computer systems, the servers, the data centers, the backup tapes, everything like that. So technology plays a key role in it. But we've also got manual data or paper-based data from, the forms that we fill in through customers or through our personal lives, and the printing of data or archiving data in archive centres. So a mountain of data. And let's be honest about it, it's not disappearing, it's not getting any shorter, it's getting bigger if anything. So from the cradle to the grave, we're generating personal information all the time. So the big question is, what is it worth? What is the value of our personal data? Well, as an auditor, I suppose I'm trained to ask people questions when I go into a business to assess how secure the organisation is. If we're benchmarking the organisation against a particular standard, questions are just part and parcel of that. So this is just another one. Again, some of the presenters had some very good points to make earlier on about security and personal data. So just to reiterate some of those points, one of the first questions I would be asking is, where is your data? And what data do you have? And I'd also look to ask somebody, what is the value of that data as well? How much is it worth? Because in some cases we're dealing with finance departments. They may need to come up with a budget for security. In other cases, we're just looking at what is the value of security to the business. And in a lot of cases, I'd end up getting something like this typical response, somebody scratching the head and going, I really don't know how much the data is worth. So I'm going to attempt to answer that and give you some sort of guidance today in my presentation. So firstly, I think we should be looking at data from a NASA perspective. We should have a register of the data in all of the standards that we look at. They would look for identifying where is that data held, what data are we talking about. And particularly I think we could categorise data in terms of risk or value from low, medium to high. When it comes to personal data, you probably give away your name and address and your telephone number on a daily basis. But other data that may not be freely available would be, say, mother's maiden name, employment details, even children's names and things like that, or personal emails, if you've got email on your phone. More valuable data than that, again, will be, of course, passwords, medical data, PPSN, credit reports, banking data, of course, as well. So where does this all lead to? Of course, you go into any financial institution these days to look for a loan or another service, they're going to look for your ID. They're going to ask you to prove that you are who you say you are. So they're going to look for some form of personal identification. It's more than likely going to be a photographic ID like a driver's license or your passport, etc. We're all familiar with that type of thing. So the value scenario, as I see it, as I said earlier, you could look at it from the individual perspective. We've all got a personal value and interest in our own data, our own personal data. It's questionable as to what that value is. We've also got the value to the business, the organisation that we work for, and who depends on us. And then we've got value to others. So I'll quickly go through those. Scenario one, to the individual. Well, it would depend on a number of factors, naturally. You've got age, income, credit rating, and I suppose it's a matter of opinion. Scenario two is a little bit different. From a business perspective, it's a little easier to answer that question, I think, rather than looking at it from a matter of opinion. Because we know what the data is, or at least we should know what the data is, what data we have. This particular slide is referencing Poneman Institute, who do an awful lot of research in security. I know some of you are very, very familiar with their work, and I'm not a big fan of statistics personally, but just for the point of making this specific point, I pulled this slide out of one of their research papers, their white papers, which is available on poneman.org. And it was a global security survey that they did, taking in the US and a number of countries in Europe as well as Australia. And although the data is going back to 2009, 2010, it gives us some indication as to what data is worth. If I look at the UK stats, this references the cost of a data breach specifically. And we would find that the data, according to the analysis, ranges from 500,000 to literally 5 million in terms of a data breach. So I'm not going to get caught up too much on the facts and the figures, because facts change, and we can take it or leave it. But another good slide I found in their presentation was that, I think the Data Commissioner as well highlighted this in his presentation, that a record itself, they summed it up that the record, when they analysed all the data, was worth around $214 per record. So, every one of us here has different amounts of data, but at least that figure can be used now to work off a kind of a benchmark in terms of working out what our data is actually worth, or what the value is. And again, if you look at the simple scenario of maybe a laptop with, that's been lost in an organisation, what is that actually worth, in terms of the personal data that's on it? You might have 1,000 records on it, but the laptop itself could be replaced for a nominal fee, 500, 600 euros these days. You can get a laptop. And that's the common mistake that we find when we discuss this issue to organisations, in particular management. They just see it as an IT issue, and it can be replaced very, very quickly. It's not a big deal, it's not a cost. But the real cost is in terms of and the real value is in terms of the data that's on those systems. So, working on the basis of the Poneman record value of $214, we round that off to 200 euro just to be nice and easy. We're looking at 200k for the average laptop with 1,000 records on it. So a different scenario altogether. So again, if we look at something wider than that, you've got a business maybe with 100,000 customers, 5 records minimum per customer. You're looking at around 500,000 records there. Each record being worth 200. We're now talking 600 million rather than 500 euros in terms of a scenario of the worth of that data. Now, to move on, conservative estimate on a data breach. This is something that we come across in our business on a regular basis. And with the law changing as well around data protection, there is more of an onus on organisations to report incidents. And you'll find, if you read these reports from the Commissioner's website, you'll see that there's been a vast increase in that as well. But a common question that people ask me is, how much is a breach actually going to cost me? Because I haven't gone through it. How can I work out what the value of it is? I'll just put one little slide together here on this, just to give, in the case of a small business, a small organisation with maybe 1,500 customers, because Ireland is a very small organisation, or a very small territory at the end of the day, and the majority of the businesses here are small enterprises that we're commonly dealing with. So you're going to have a number of costs in a data breach. You're going to have postage, you're going to have to communicate with your customers, you're going to have maybe possibly fines, penalties, etc. Staff are going to have to get involved to manage the scenario. You're going to have legal costs. And in particular, if we reference back to the Commissioner's statement of the changes that are coming down the line, European legislation is going to literally wipe the floor with us in terms of penalties and fines. They're just frightening what's coming down there. So this is just one scenario. Don't take it as gospel. It's just to give you an example. You've got telephone hotlines and suppliers' fees, bank fees, etc., investigation costs. You wouldn't see much change out of 50 grand. And of course, the bigger your organisation, the more data you have, the bigger the breach, the more it's going to cost. The bottom line is it will cost. Scenario 3 then is looking at others. What is the value of our personal data to others? So we're looking at the threats here, and obviously we've got internal threats within organisations, and I was speaking to some people earlier on this morning, and they were talking about various breaches, this and that, without mentioning names of that. But the scenario is that realistically a lot of breaches occur inside organisations, behind the firewall. It's not so much You know, I'm not saying hackers don't exist or that. They do, and they are a real threat. But the majority of breaches that we come across occur internally because of lack of controls internally for organizations. Just to give, by way of one example, don't want to pick on anybody, but here's a headline from a couple of months back from one government department's welfare, where one individual had access to obviously 7 million records and was found to be apparently selling them on the side. So, you know, it's looking at, for me, it's looking at the root cause of a data breach. It's looking at what actually happened, how did it happen. In most cases, technology kind of gets the blame. It's the black sheep of it, but it's not actually technology's fault. In most cases, it's people that are the weakest link, as we've discussed previously. So, if we look at others, who are we talking about? We're obviously talking about criminals. You know, personal data, PII, is of great interest to criminals. In particular, your name, your address, your date of birth, mother's maiden name, passwords, usernames, etc. Even your children's names, photographs, employment details, previous addresses, medical data, PPSN, etc. And why is it of interest? Well, at the end of the day, it's a business to them. Personal data is a currency, really, on the black market. There's been books written about this. There's been films made about it. You know, it's a huge underground black economy that exists in selling information, in particular personal information. So ID theft is really what I want to talk about. It's a big business, and it's worth its weight in gold. So some of the presenters identified some of the carding forums that exist out there. You only have to go to the likes of Google or go to YouTube and put in carding, and a whole host of information will come up about how to become a criminal using personal data. As I say, books have been written that will explain how easily it is to get your hands on personal data. So this is just one example of many, many out there. So these guys are real. This threat of cyber crime is very much a real threat to organizations and individuals. There are many different methods that criminals will use to profit from personal data and to get their hands on it. There's some very simple methods, things like social engineering, dumpster diving. And then there's some sophisticated methods that they use, such as technology-based, like Trojan viruses. They're now using texting as well. They're just randomly sending out texts. I don't know if any of you have received texts over the last number of weeks and months. Personally, I have, and literally they're saying you are a winner. They want you to go to a particular website or a particular link. Those things happen through texting, through all forms of technology, and email, of course. So it's up to us as security people to make our employees and personnel aware of these threats. To look at another white paper that I reviewed recently, cybercrime goes mobile. Has anybody ever lost their phone? Anybody? Yes. Okay, so there's one very brave individual down there saying they've lost their phone. I know lots of people that have lost their phones, you know, be it in a taxi or, you know, the airport, or we're traveling. We're all on the move. A lot of personal data on our phones, as we've discussed earlier. And, you know, 35% of adults, according to this survey, have lost their mobile devices. But how many of us actually have security on our mobile devices? Could I see a show of hands? Anybody got antivirus on their phones? Okay, good scenario there. About half the audience. Password protected, encryption, etc. Those kind of tools, they certainly do help. So moving on to identity theft. I'm just coming towards the end of my presentation. I just want to give you a couple of examples of real examples of ID theft and how people have been duped. Anybody recognize this guy? This guy's name is Frank Abagnale. I'm sure some of you have heard the name, familiar with it. There's been a Leonardo DiCaprio movie called To Catch a Thief, which is made about his life story. He's written a book, obviously. And Frank was one of the leaders, I suppose, going back many, many years, one of the major criminals who impersonated pilots, doctors, Assistant Attorney General, etc., etc. So how does this fit into the whole cybercrime thing, and what is the value of it? Well, it's no wonder Frank's smiling here, because to him it's worth $4 million in bad checks. You know, at the end of the day, he's made a lifestyle choice. He's made an awful lot of money from it. Another example would be this gentleman here, Albert Gonzalez. I don't know if you've come across him, aka the Soup Nazi. Albert was part of the shadow crew who masterminded many, many different crimes. To his fame, or TK Maxx, as we know it, was one of the major organisations that was hacked into from his efforts. And there was many others as well, 7-Eleven, Barnes & Noble. He couped around 135 million in credit cards, and it was one of the biggest news stories to hit the press, obviously. He's now serving 20 years. Another example would be this gentleman on the other side of it. Okay, we look at criminals, but there's a flip side to it. There's also individuals, people just like you and me, or our customers as well, who are affected by ID theft. This guy here, his name is Todd Davis. He's an American gentleman. He is CEO of an organisation called LifeLock. And LifeLock is a security company who provides services around protecting identity from thieves. He ended up being a victim himself because he was so, I suppose, certain, so confident of his organisation that he posted his social security number on a billboard. So across the states, his social security number went everywhere. Of course, it wasn't long before criminals copped on, and all of a sudden, poor Todd was finding that, you know, there was credit being racked up from different accounts all over America that were being drafted up. So in total, he had his ID stolen 12 or 13 times. So various amounts of cash were being siphoned out of accounts in Todd's name. AT&T for two and a half grand. Verizon, account was opened in his name. Various ATMs were used. Swiss Colony, number of accounts were opened in Todd's name. And this is a real guy at the end of the day. The bottom net effect of this for Todd was his company was fined 12 million from the FTC for false advertising. So it wasn't a good thing for him, not a good day. Another example would be a very famous individual for lots of reasons. His real name, Eldrick T. Woods. We commonly refer to him as Tiger Woods. Another victim of ID theft. And there's been lots of victims. I'm just literally picking a couple out of the sky here. What happened here was a gentleman, Anthony Lamar Taylor, realised that his real name wasn't Tiger at all, it was Eldrick. And he went about trying to formulate and collect all of the personal information that he could on Tiger. And I suppose when you're famous, there's a lot of information out there about you, but even in our day-to-day, you don't have to be famous, you don't have to be a mega star to be a victim of ID theft. It affects people just like you and me on a regular basis. But what happened in this instance was Anthony obtained a California driver license, and from there he built up a chain of personal identifiable information on Tiger Woods and racked up literally tens of thousands of dollars worth of equipment. He in fact filled a warehouse full of luxury cars, goods, etc., etc. So I suppose the point there is, I'm just trying to tie in, he's now serving 200 years, thankfully. So another one off the streets. So I suppose this is a real threat. You know, we're not joking when we talk about ID theft. I'm just trying to bring it all into reality. You may know somebody that has had their ID stolen. You may not. But just to summarise again, there's lots of facts and figures out there. I'm not going to dwell too much on those. But in Europe, we're talking anywhere from 16 to 27 billion. This industry is worth cybercrime. Estimated values from Europe, the States, China is massive. 46 billion and growing. So it's something that we can't really ignore. And this institute, ICTTF, is a fantastic opportunity for all of us to get together every so often. The website, the portal itself, is a really good way of communicating with each other. You know, today is a great event, it's a great opportunity. Tomorrow we're here as well, but we can't always you know, take the day off and come out to these events. We have to get on with business, but the portal is there 24/7 for us to communicate with. So to summarise, personal data is the target, which means you are the target, your business is a target, your customers are a target. So criminals make a fortune from buying and selling personal identifiable information. Attacks are simple and sophisticated. Cybercrime is worth billions, literally. So thank you very much for your attention. There is a comfort break coming up straight away. So thanks again. Cheers.